Imagine a family completely torn apart by intense jealousy, sibling rivalry, blatant favoritism, and even a plot for murder. Now imagine that exact same deeply dysfunctional family becoming the absolute foundation of one of the most influential and enduring civilizations in human history. It sounds like a premium cable television drama, but it is actually the true origin story of the 12 tribes of Israel. Everything starts with one patriarch, Jacob, who was later renamed Israel. Jacob had 12 sons with 4 different women, his wives Leah and Rachel, and their handmaids, Bilhah and Zilpah. Right from the start, the household was a pressure cooker of fierce competition. The brothers fought for their father's attention, fought for power, and famously sold their own brother into slavery. Yet, on his deathbed, Jacob gathered these incredibly flawed men and gave each of them a highly specific blessing, a prophetic vision that would permanently define their descendants' destinies, their symbols, and their distinct roles in the ancient world. But before we break down who these tribes actually are, we need to address a massive historical math problem. We always hear about the 12 tribes, but if you look at an ancient map of the Promised Land, the territory is actually divided into 13 sections. Why? Because the tribe of Levi was exclusively chosen to be the elite priesthood. They were given 0 land of their own, scattered instead throughout the other territories to serve. To make up for the missing piece of the map, Jacob gave a double inheritance to his favourite son, Joseph, effectively splitting Joseph's lineage into 2 completely distinct tribes, Ephraim and Manasseh. So 12 sons, 13 land allotments, and 1 epic story, from fierce, ravenous wolves to venomous snakes, and from royal lions to brilliant scholars. The tribes functioned like a massive, complex machine where every single gear had a totally different purpose. Today we are breaking down every tribe of Israel, decoding their ancient symbols, their unique personalities, and what each one truly represents. To truly understand the 12 tribes, we have to divide them by their mothers. The intense rivalry between Jacob's wives completely shaped the destiny of their children. We start with the first group, the 6 sons of Leah. Leah was Jacob's first wife, but she was entirely unloved. She spent her whole life trying to win her husband's affection by giving him sons, and her boys grew up in a household overshadowed by drama, carrying a fierce drive for power and validation. First up is Reuben, the absolute eldest. Reuben's symbol is crashing, turbulent water, and sometimes the mandrake flower. As the firstborn, Reuben was legally entitled to the ultimate jackpot, a double portion of the inheritance, the leadership of the family, and the priesthood. He had massive potential. But his symbol, the rushing water, represents his fatal flaw, immense instability, and dangerous impulsivity. In a catastrophic move to assert dominance, Reuben slept with Bilhah, his father's concubine. That single, reckless action cost him everything. On his deathbed, Jacob looked right at his eldest son and declared, "Unstable as water, you shall not excel." Reuben was entirely stripped of his birthright. His descendants settled east of the Jordan River, far from the centre of power, and tragically the tribe of Reuben never produced a single significant judge, prophet, or king in biblical history. They are the ultimate representation of squandered potential. Next is Simeon, the second son. Simeon's symbol is the sword, sometimes paired with fortress gates, representing pure, unadulterated wrath and violence. Simeon's defining moment came when his sister, Dinah, was assaulted by a prince in the city of Shechem. Together with his brother Levi, Simeon orchestrated a brutal, terrifying revenge. They tricked the men of the city and slaughtered every single one of them while they were defenseless. Jacob was utterly horrified by this extreme bloodshed. His deathbed blessing for Simeon was actually a curse on his anger. Jacob prophesied, "I will divide them in Jacob and scatter them in Israel." And that is exactly what happened. The tribe of Simeon never secured a solid, independent territory. Their land was entirely swallowed up inside the borders of Judah. Over time, the tribe of Simeon essentially dissolved, fading completely into the background of history as the invisible, absorbed tribe. Levi is the third son, and his story is the ultimate ancient redemption arc. His symbol is the high priest's breastplate. Now, Levi was right alongside Simeon during the bloody massacre at Shechem, and he received the exact same curse from Jacob, to be scattered and divided. But the Levites took their fierce, violent zeal and completely redirected it. Hundreds of years later, when the Israelites were worshipping the golden calf at Mount Sinai, Moses drew a line in the sand and asked, "Who is on the Lord's side?" The tribe of Levi was the only one that stepped forward. Because of that absolute loyalty, they were transformed. The curse of being scattered became a sacred blessing. They were denied any physical territory, but they were elevated to become the exclusive, elite priesthood of the nation. God himself was declared their inheritance. From this tribe came Moses, Aaron, and generations of priests who guarded the Ark of the Covenant. They represent spiritual transformation and sacred duty. Then we hit Judah, the fourth son, and the undisputed heavyweight champion of the tribes. Judah's symbol is the roaring lion. While Reuben lost the birthright and Simeon and Levi were disqualified by violence, leadership seamlessly transferred to Judah. Jacob prophesied, "Judah, your brothers will praise you. The scepter will not depart from Judah." This tribe is all about royal power, kingship, and absolute dominance. Judah produced King David, King Solomon, and the entire royal dynasty of the south. Even when the northern tribes were completely wiped out, the tribe of Judah survived the brutal Babylonian exile. In fact, they became so synonymous with the surviving people that the very words Jew and Judaism are direct derivations of the name Judah. The Lion of Judah remains one of the most recognizable symbols in global history, representing unbreakable strength, protection, and eternal sovereignty. Issachar is the fifth son of Leah, and his symbol is the strong, raw-boned donkey, often accompanied by the sun and the stars. Now, calling someone a donkey today is an insult, but in the ancient Near East, a strong donkey was an incredibly valuable, respected beast of burden. Issachar represents hard work, extreme humility, and deep intellectual brilliance. Jacob described Issachar as bowing his shoulder to bear a burden. Historically, this burden was interpreted as the heavy yoke of studying the Torah. The men of Issachar became the ultimate scholars, the judges, and the intellectuals of Israel. The Bible explicitly notes that the men of Issachar understood the times and knew what Israel should do. They were the strategic minds, the spiritual backbone, and the academic elite of the ancient nation. Zebulun, the sixth and final son of Leah, forms a fascinating pair with Issachar. Zebulun's symbol is the ship. Jacob prophesied that Zebulun would dwell by the seashore and become a haven for ships. This tribe was all about maritime trade, commerce, and booming economics. They were the businessmen, the navigators, and the coastal wealth generators. But the most interesting part of Zebulun is their historic, symbiotic partnership with the tribe of Issachar. According to ancient tradition, these two brothers struck a brilliant deal. Zebulun would go out to sea, run the massive trade routes, and generate enormous financial wealth. In return, they would use that money to completely fund Issachar's intense spiritual and scholarly studies. Zebulun represents the beautiful synergy between material success and spiritual pursuit, proving that economics and faith could perfectly support one another. We now move to the second group, the sons of the handmaids, Bilhah and Zilpah. These four tribes were heavily associated with military prowess, extreme physical environments, and abundant resources. First in this group is Dan. Dan's symbol is a venomous snake biting a horse's heel, and sometimes the scales of justice. Dan was a tiny tribe, but they were absolutely lethal. Jacob said, "Dan shall judge his people." He will be a serpent by the way, a viper by the path. The tribe of Dan represents the classic underdog utilising brilliant guerrilla warfare. They couldn't fight massive armies head-on, so they struck from the shadows, utilising stealth, sabotage, and unexpected tactics to bring down enemies much larger than themselves. The most famous descendant of Dan is none other than Samson, a lone wolf superhero with superhuman strength, who single-handedly terrorised the Philistine armies. Dan represents swift justice, covert operations, and the deadly strike from the shadows. Next is Naphtali. His symbol is a wild doe let loose, representing unbridled freedom, incredible speed, and agility. Jacob said Naphtali gives beautiful words. The tribe of Naphtali settled high up in the rugged, mountainous regions of Galilee. Because of their terrain, they became swift-footed, agile mountain warriors who could outmaneuver anyone, but they were also heavily associated with poetry, grace, and communication. They were the messengers who ran across the mountains to deliver good news of military victories to the rest of the nation. In the book of Judges, the famous military commander Barak came from Naphtali, leading a lightning-fast charge down the mountains to wipe out enemy chariots. Naphtali represents the perfect balance between fierce mountain survival and poetic, graceful beauty. Then we have Gad. Gad's symbol is a cluster of military tents, or a heavily armed troop of warriors. Gad was the absolute vanguard, the frontline defenders of the nation. Jacob's prophecy for Gad is essentially a battle cry. A troop shall overcome him, but he shall overcome at the last. Settling on the eastern side of the Jordan River, Gad was totally exposed to hostile nations and constant, relentless nomadic raids. Because of this, they evolved into the Spartans of ancient Israel. They were hardened, fierce, and entirely uncompromising. The Bible describes the warriors of Gad as men with the faces of lions, who were as incredibly fast as gazelles on the mountains. Gad represents pure, unyielding military defence and the resilience to take a heavy hit and strike back twice as hard. Asher is the last of the handmaid's sons, and his vibe is entirely different. Asher's symbol is the olive tree, or sometimes a bountiful sheaf of wheat. Asher represents pure, unadulterated luxury, wealth, and material prosperity. Jacob prophesied, Asher's food will be rich, he will provide delicacies fit for a king. The territory allotted to Asher was along the northern Mediterranean coast, and it contained some of the most insanely fertile soil in the entire region. They produced the highest quality olive oil, the richest foods, and the most valuable agricultural exports. Asher was a tribe completely blessed with peace and material abundance. Ancient traditions even state that the women of Asher were so famously beautiful and refined that they frequently married into the royal families and the high priesthood. Asher represents the pinnacle of ancient economic luxury and the good life. Finally, we arrive at the third group, the sons of Rachel. Rachel was Jacob's favourite, deeply loved wife, making her sons the unquestioned favourites. These tribes represent miracle children, extreme favouritism, and the absolute heights of power. The first is Joseph. Joseph's symbol is a fruitful bough by a well, and the powerful wild ox. Joseph's story is the most famous family drama of all. His jealous half-brothers stripped him, threw him in a pit, and sold him as a slave to Egypt. But Joseph is the ultimate survivor. He rose from a forgotten prison cell to become the absolute second in command of the entire Egyptian empire, saving the known world from starvation. Because of his suffering and immense success, Jacob gave Joseph the ultimate prize, the double portion of the inheritance. Joseph himself did not get a single slice of land. Instead, his two sons, Ephraim and Manasseh, were elevated to the status of full independent tribes. Ephraim became the wildly dominant superpower of the north, eventually becoming so powerful that the entire northern kingdom was sometimes just called Ephraim. Manasseh received a completely massive, sprawling expanse of territory that spanned both sides of the Jordan River. Together, the house of Joseph represents extreme fertility. the ability to completely overcome catastrophic betrayal, and an immense, dominating political power that rivaled even the royal house of Judah. The very last son is Benjamin. His symbol is the ravenous, devouring wolf. Benjamin was the baby of the family, the last child of Rachel, who tragically died giving birth to him. You might expect the youngest to be coddled and soft, but the tribe of Benjamin was the absolute opposite. Jacob prophesied, "Benjamin is a ravenous wolf. In the morning he devours the prey, in the evening he divides the plunder." They were the most feared, elite shock troops in all of Israel. Benjamin was a very small tribe, but they were terrifyingly lethal. They were specifically famous for their ambidextrous warriors and their elite units of left-handed slingers, who could sling a heavy stone at a single hair and never, ever miss. When you went to war against Benjamin, you were going up against a ferocious, unpredictable enemy. King Saul, the very first king of Israel, was a Benjamite, and hundreds of years later, the fierce and highly educated Apostle Paul also proudly claimed his descent from the tribe of the ravenous wolf. Benjamin represents fierce loyalty, lethal accuracy, and a ferocity that vastly outsized their numbers. For centuries, these 12 distinct, highly competitive tribes managed to operate as a single, unstoppable united monarchy. Under King David and King Solomon, they reached their absolute golden age, building a massive empire of wealth and power. But right after Solomon's death, the ultimate family drama exploded once again. The nation completely fractured in a catastrophic civil war. The massive 12-gear machine broke squarely in half. The royal tribe of Judah and the fierce tribe of Benjamin stayed loyal to the throne in the south, forming the kingdom of Judah. The other 10 tribes completely broke away, forming the independent kingdom of Israel in the north. For over 200 years, the 10 northern tribes survived, but then came the absolute, undisputed superpower of the ancient world, the ruthless, terrifying Assyrian Empire. In 722 BCE, the Assyrian war machine completely conquered the northern kingdom. The Assyrians had a very specific, highly brutal tactic for dealing with conquered nations: psychological warfare through mass deportation. They completely emptied the land, dragging the 10 northern tribes away into forced exile deep within the vast Assyrian Empire and replacing them with foreigners. And then they vanished. The 10 northern tribes were completely erased from the historical record. They became the legendary 10 lost tribes of Israel. What actually happened to them? Did they simply assimilate into the surrounding Mesopotamian cultures, intermarrying and losing their unique identity forever? Or did they secretly migrate across the globe, keeping their traditions alive in the shadows? This is where history turns into one of the greatest unsolved mysteries of all time. Today, there are distinct communities scattered all over the world who fiercely claim to be the direct descendants of these lost tribes. We have the Lemba tribe in southern Africa, whose oral traditions of migrating from the Middle East are backed up by modern genetic DNA markers linking them to ancient Jewish populations. We have the B'nai Menashe living in the remote corners of northeastern India, who claim direct descent from the tribe of Manasseh and have maintained ancient biblical customs for millennia. There are the Beta Israel of Ethiopia, who actually possessed an ancient version of the Torah. Over the centuries, explorers and scholars have proposed wild, explosive theories connecting the lost tribes to everyone from Native American tribes to the ancient Japanese and even the British royal family. While secular historians heavily argue that the exiled tribes simply blended into the ancient Middle East, the tantalizing mystery of the 10 lost tribes continues to absolutely fascinate explorers, geneticists, and theologians to this very day. The story of the 12 tribes of Israel is ultimately a story about the absolute necessity of diversity. Think about it. An entire nation made up solely of fierce, uncompromising warriors like Gad or Benjamin would eventually self-destruct in endless conflict. A nation of only brilliant scholars like Issachar would be completely overrun by their enemies. A nation of only royal kings like Judah would have absolutely no one to build the economy and sail the ships like Zebulun. They functioned exactly like a massive, complex human body. Every single tribe had a radically different personality, a unique skill set, and a distinct symbol, but they absolutely needed each other to survive and thrive. And their ancient legacy is far from dead. Even thousands of years later, these exact symbols are completely embedded in our modern world. From the roaring lion of Judah appearing on city flags, reggae culture, and blockbuster movies, to the timeless scales of justice and olive branches of peace, the historical DNA of these ancient tribes still surrounds us every single day. So, which of the 12 tribes do you find the most fascinating? Are you a strategic scholar, a fiercely loyal warrior, or a cunning underdog? Let me know your favourite tribe in the comments down below. If you enjoyed this deep dive into ancient history, make sure to smash that like button, subscribe for more epic historical breakdowns, and I will see you in the next video.